Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera, former leader of the Sinaloa cartel, considered by the U.S. government to be the most powerful drug dealer of all time, now languishes in a 7x12 concrete cell in ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado. In 2019, he was found guilty of 10 criminal counts including money laundering, drug trafficking, and kidnapping. Ultimately, El Chapo was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Unlike the other times he's been incarcerated, this time El Chapo doesn't have any pals in prison, and his contact with the outside world is extremely limited. There's no way he's remotely running the Sinaloa cartel. However, sadly, the arrest and conviction of El Chapo has hardly put a dent in the cartel's ability to make money. More than one newspaper has pointed out that the lack of change to cartel business shows how disposable any one person is in the narco economy. Actually, Sinaloa members do not consider themselves to be a cartel, but rather they're a federation of families, most of whom come from the Golden Triangle, a mountainous region where the Mexican states of Sinaloa, Chihuahua, and Durango meet. This area is also notorious for growing and producing many illegal drugs. There have always been multiple groups led by different bosses within the cartel. El Chapo's faction was just one of the strongest and most savvy when it comes to public perception. After El Chapo was arrested in January of 2016, there were 3 different leadership groups aligned with 3 factions within the cartel which vied for power. The first faction, Los Chapitos, was led by 3 of El Chapo's sons, Ivan, Ovidio, and Alfredo Guzman, along with their uncle Aureliano Guzman Loera. Then there was a faction led by Damaso Lopez Nunez, aka El Licenciado, a former state police official turned right-hand man of El Chapo. El Licenciado's faction reportedly joined forces with the sometimes ally, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. A third faction was headed up by Ismael El Mayo Zambada, the former partner of El Chapo. El Mayo had support from Beltran Leyva organization, a former ally of the Sinaloa cartel. In some cases, El Mayo and the Guzmans worked together and shared power, so it's hard to determine the initial level of rivalry between these two groups. The internal struggle for the control of the Sinaloa cartel set off a new wave of violence across Mexico, especially in the Sinaloa state capital of Culiacan. Homicides, kidnappings, and extortion all increased. In January 2017, El Chapo was extradited to the U.S. Per government data, the first half of the year, Sinaloa state saw 879 homicides compared to 524 over the same period in 2016. This is likely an undercount. These are the murders the government was aware of. In February 2017, Licenciado allegedly set up an ambush meant to kill El Mayo, as well as Alfredo and Ivan Guzman. They escaped with minor injuries, however a few of their bodyguards were shot and killed. Soon after the failed assassination attempt, Licenciado, along with his son Damaso Lopez Serrano, aka El Menilis, launched a cyber warfare attack on the Guzmans using bots and hackers. But the scheme backfired when one of the hackers used a rigged smartphone to secretly capture video of Licenciado and pass it to authorities. As a result, the Mexican government was able to track down and arrest Licenciado in May 2017. El Menilis was in a much weaker position without his father around. In July 2017, he walked across the border and surrendered to U.S. authorities. Allegedly, he was being hunted by El Mayo. El Menilis quickly negotiated to provide information in exchange for becoming a protected witness. Licenciado has also ended up in the hands of the U.S. government as he was extradited in early 2018. This left only 2 factions vying for control of the Sinaloa cartel. A truce and power-sharing partnership was quickly formed between El Mayo and the Guzmans. In February 2019, a Sinaloan journalist claimed that Los Chapitos, under the leadership of the Guzmans, controlled street-level drug dealing, weapons, and the defense operations, while level-headed El Mayo negotiated and took care of big deals. Small skirmishes continued between the 2 factions as well as with the authorities. Then, on October 17, 2019, members of the Mexican National Guard captured Ovidio Guzman at home in Culiacan. More than 700 cartel gunmen rampaged across the city, attacking and even killing several civilian, government, and military targets. The cartel was better equipped than the authorities, having armored vehicles, rocket launchers, and heavy machine guns, among other gear. The cartel took several hostages, including 8 servicemen. Within about 4 hours of the battle starting, the government let Ovidio go. 5 people died during the Battle of Culiacan, and the government sent special forces in as reinforcement to patrol the city. Ovidio's kidnapping and the violence surrounding his release added to the unease in the Sinaloa region. The tension between El Mayo's faction versus Los Chapitos ramped up. An intense multi-month struggle began for the leadership of the Sinaloa cartel. On November 26, 2019, El Mayo supporters beat 11 Culiacan municipal police officers who had ties to the Guzmans. On December 3rd, after a leak of some WhatsApp conversations, hitmen with ties to Los Chapitos invaded an area of Culiacan controlled by one of El Mayo's lieutenants. On February 2nd, Los Chapitos fired large-caliber weapons in a couple of Culiacan neighborhoods, which were El Mayo territory. On February 26th, the close collaborator of El Mayo's leadership team was assassinated. As a terror tactic, the murder was recorded and uploaded to social media. On March 6th, an assassination of a prominent El Mayo supporter failed. After this attack, Los Chapitos and El Mayo's faction negotiated a truce, with the Guzman ceding some neighborhoods of Culiacan to the El Mayo faction. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. heavily restricted or closed borders and non-essential businesses, as well as implementing shelter-in-place orders in many states. Much of the infighting stopped as the Sinaloa cartel had to focus on keeping its lucrative drug business flowing. While the Sinaloa cartel has diversified into other rackets, such as kidnapping, money laundering, and stealing petrol from nationalized pipelines, drugs are still central to its operation. Drug trafficking, as well as money laundering, briefly dipped and then rebounded as the cartel found its way around COVID-19 restraints. Both the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel actually used the pandemic to withhold regular drug shipments to manipulate the methamphetamine trade and increase the cost in the U.S. consumer market. By late spring of 2020, a few Mexican newspapers claimed that El Mayo had ceded the fight for leadership of the Sinaloa cartel. He's in his 70s and allegedly is quite sick with diabetes. El Chapo's sons, Ivan, Ovidio, and Alfredo, are now in charge. But the truth is that at this point, the Sinaloa cartel is immense. It operates in 54 countries, connecting manufacturers and distributors, bankers and businesses, and extracting money at each step. There is no longer a single face of the organization. The Guzman brothers and the Sinaloa cartel now face a specific challenge: the rise of their sometimes ally, the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Composed of factions that have splintered off from various cartels and local militia groups, the CJNG has rapidly increased size since its formation in 2010. CJNG leader Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, aka El Mencho, is known for being shrewd and brutal. He's one of the most wanted men by both Mexico and the U.S. In fact, the U.S. has offered a $10 million reward for his capture. Most recently, the CJNG has sparked bloody turf battles to contest Sinaloa's control in various Mexican cities, especially valuable smuggling border towns, such as Tijuana and Ciudad Juarez. It'll be interesting to see if the Sinaloa cartel can maintain a position at the top when the CJNG and other cartels are gunning for its business. We know you want to watch another video. Who controls the mafia? Check out our video about the Castellammare New York Mafia War here. Who are the most dangerous criminals hiding in witness protection? Find out here.